in tears, I was confessing these things, and Paul just kept saying, Jesus wants you to know that he's here and that you're okay, that you're okay. And I said, okay. And he said, Jesus wants you to know that he's giving you freedom right now. And I said, okay. And he said, Jesus wants you to know that he's not just breaking the chains, but he's taken the cuffs off so that the chains will never be reattached again. And I said, okay. And he said he wants you to reach up and touch his hand. And so I reached up as if Jesus was right there, and I held his hand. And he said he wants you to know that this is the day where everything changes and that you'll remember for the rest of your life. And I said, okay. At about 4 years old, my parents divorced, my dad left. My mom worked 2 to 3 jobs just to put food on the table, so I was alone a lot, and vulnerable to a lot of insecurities and doubts. And I discovered pornography at 12 years old, and immediately got addicted to that. Started drinking alcohol at 14 years old, lived a promiscuous life, sought security and affirmation through relationships. I was 27 years old, and she was 19, about to be 20, and we needed to get married. And neither of us were in the church, really grew up in the church. We grew up around the church, but we knew we needed a pastor. And I'd been hunting with a guy that invited a pastor, and I was my only connection to a pastor. And so I asked him, reached out to him and said, hey, could you marry us? And he said, yeah, but I'm gonna have to bring you in for counseling. One counseling session before that. And so he did, and we left that counseling session in tears, knowing that we needed Jesus in our lives. And so we started attending church, and started building a relationship with the Lord. Still addicted to everything. Didn't realize I was addicted to alcohol, but knew I was addicted to pornography. Tried to stop that, couldn't. And then we actually, I was in the military, went off to some military training in Alabama. That's where my wife discovered my porn addiction, and it started destroying our marriage at that point in time. And lost intimacy in the marriage, which and affirmation, and I didn't realize at the time, but I really was clinging to her affirmation because I needed it, because I was so insecure, and that really made me vulnerable, and I became a vacillator. If I felt like she loved me, I was good. If I felt like she didn't, I would beat her up emotionally and let her know, and it just really started to tear at the fabric of our marriage, and started ripping it apart. She didn't trust me anymore. And this whole time, I'm part of a men's group, and I'm praying for pornography to go away, and I just can't. There was like no power for it to go away. And I felt like I was growing in a pretty good relationship with the Lord, but just nothing was changing. And during worship, I started hearing "Go up front and kneel" during worship, and no one would go up front and kneel. There was a few people at the first church I was at that would raise their hands during worship, and that was okay, but no one went up front and kneel. And at first, when I heard that inkling, I went to go up front, and I'm like, wait, I can't get out of the pew. Like, I'll interrupt people's worship. So I talked myself out of that. And then the next time, I'm like, well, I don't, and I just kept talking myself. I kept hearing "Go up front and kneel." And it was the same voice. And then I heard "Go up front and kneel, and men will follow." And I'm like, well, maybe my friend Terry will follow me, but I'm gonna go up there and kneel, and no one's gonna be there. Like, I kept having this conversation, and I kept hearing it. I never did. And then I led our family out of that church, and I'm in this seeker-friendly church where there's 300-400 people, and there isn't a soul that has his hands raised, and worship is 15 minutes long, and I hear go up front and kneel. And I'm like, if I wouldn't do it at that church of 80 where half the people have their hands raised, I'm not gonna do it here. I'm like, that would be a total embarrassment. And I heard that a few more times, and then I heard go up front and kneel and men will follow. And I'm like, no one's gonna follow me. No one's gonna follow me. And so I wasn't obedient, and I never did it. And this whole time, I'm struggling with anger also, and I just have tremendous outbursts. And most of them related with alcohol, but there was one instance where alcohol wasn't related. And my wife was several months pregnant with our third child, and I actually took her down to the ground physically. I was in such a fit of rage. And that was kind of an eye-opening moment for her, because she excused it before and said it was the alcohol. And I'd read anger books before, the anger book by Gary Chapman, and I would get a few months, kind of reprieve from the anger, but then it would just come back, and I just couldn't get free from it. I couldn't get free from just the icky feeling that certain things would give me. This whole time it was just, again, tearing the fabric of our marriage, and I didn't realize it. I was relying on that my wife was a Christian and she could never leave me. On approximately November of 2020, my wife basically gave me an eviction notice. She said that she was going to move out and that our marriage was over, and she didn't really want anything to do with me anymore. And I did not see it coming, even though looking back I could see why. I did not see it coming, and so it rocked my world. And up to that point, she asked if I would drink less, and I got angry at her and said, "Who are you to say I should drink less?" And I was drinking every day, and I wasn't getting drunk, but I was getting pretty heavily buzzed every day, and was looking forward to that time to start, 4:30, 5 o'clock, and so I knew that was one of the things I could try to change. And so for the next 6 months, I really tried to stop drinking. I tried to stop getting angry and fighting, and she moved out for a period of time. I begged her to come back. After a few weeks, she finally did. But the whole period just seemed like a probation period, and I was trying to do everything I could to win her back. And I said, okay, I'll drink only like 3 times a week, but the nights that I wouldn't, I was sneaking it. Like I'd go get in the hot tub and I'd have some stashed in the garage, and I'd sneak around and I'd get a solo cup and I'd fill it, and I'd be in the hot tub drinking wine. Or I'd offer to go get groceries, and I'd stop and get 2 Trulies, one to drink on the way to the grocery store and one on the way back in the evening. And I couldn't stop drinking. And that's when I realized, okay, I can't stop this. I'm still struggling with pornography. We're fighting still. Even though I'm trying to save my marriage, I still have so much ickiness. We're fighting twice a week for 2 to 3 days. It was just ugly. And I knew that if it continued, it was over. And which led to the eve of my 41st birthday, which my wife and I had a huge fight. We had a huge fight, and she left, which was one of the things that really hurt me. Was when she would just leave or stonewall me, and she took the kids and went to her brother's. And I tried stopping her. I tried getting in front of the vehicle, and you could just see it, like she was gonna run me over if I didn't get out of the way. And so I'm like, I'm getting out of the way. And she left, and I was mad, and I thought I'd teach her a lesson. And so in my stupid wisdom at the time, I put my cell phone on the counter and left it there so that she wouldn't be able to get a hold of me, and so she'd have to worry about me. And just thought, I'm gonna go to a restaurant, have a few drinks, and then just stay the night at a hotel, and she's gonna worry about me all night long. I went to the bar at a restaurant and sat there, and one of the last memories of that night was, I wanna say it was about 12:30, was I went up to use the restroom. When I was done, I grabbed a drink and I came back, and my buddy had bought me a drink, and the waitress had brought a drink. So somewhere there was a miscommunication, and I had three drinks in front of me, and that was pretty much my last memory of the night. And the next day, on my 41st birthday, I woke up and I couldn't get out of bed. My head hurt so bad. And I would close my eyes and fall back to sleep, kind of, and I was just kind of going through this cycle. And finally, at 2:30 p.m., I was able to crawl out of bed. And the first thing was crawling to the window to see if I drove home, and praise God, I didn't drive home. So that was a victory. The next one was, okay, now I have to go downstairs and face my wife. And I didn't know how I got home or anything. I didn't have any memory whatsoever. And I went downstairs, and our couches were drug out of the house, out of the living room, and were outside because I'd thrown up on them when I got home, and they were covered in throw up. And my wife was standing there, and I just saw it in her eyes that it was over. Like, she was done. And she said, I took the couches outside, you can clean them. I said, okay. And so I went out and cleaned them and let them air out. And my kids were napping. They woke up from their naps. No one knew it was my birthday. I mean, my wife did, but I wasn't about to tell my kids. Like, so here I am, 41st birthday, and not much of a celebration. And I knew in that moment that if something didn't change, it was over. And I said, you know that other church that's popped up a few times in conversation and through other people? And she said, yeah. I said, maybe we go to that church too. And she said, that's probably a good idea. And so that weekend, that was the 14th, which is my birthday, April 14th of 2021. On April 18th, we went to that church. And I heard at the end of church in my head that I was done with mediocre. That's all I heard. There was a little bit of worship, a little ministry time at the end, and I just heard, you're done with mediocre. I was like, okay. So I went home, and on my mirror, I wrote done with mediocre on our bathroom mirror. And then a week later, we were back at the church, and they had an altar call at the end of the church service. And I went up front, and I wasn't the first one up there. And so I was waiting, and I saw this older couple ministering to someone, and then this younger couple. And in my wisdom, I wanted the older couple because I needed their wisdom. And so I was hoping they would finish first. But the younger couple finished first, and they invited me up, and they asked me, so what's going on? You know, what do you need? And I said, well, I basically destroyed my marriage. My wife's ready to leave me. I've tried to fix it for the last 6 months. I've only made it worse. There's nothing that I can do. And I need help. And they said, okay. Well, we'll pray for you. I said, okay. And they just kept pausing. They started, pausing. And then their names were Paul and Nicole. And Paul just said, Jesus wants you to know that he's here. And I'm like, okay. And he wants you to confess everything. I said, okay. And I went to start confessing. And Nicole stopped me. And she said, wait. Jesus said he wants you to kneel. And I was undone, because it was that exact same voice that I had been disobedient to for 10 years, that was trying to save me, that was trying to get me from destroying my family, from delivering me from pride, delivering me from myself. And it was the same voice that I heard. And so I fell on my knees. And that was where I became completely broken before the Lord. And I confessed everything to this complete stranger, these complete strangers, to a 30-year-old man and woman that I would not have the nerve to say. So I started confessing sexual addiction to my wife, pornography, alcohol, verbal, emotional, physical abuse, lust, anything that came to my mind, I just confessed it to this couple. And in tears, I was confessing these things. And Paul just kept saying, Jesus wants you to know that he's here and that you're okay, that you're okay. And I said, okay. And he said, Jesus wants you to know that he's giving you freedom right now. And I said, okay. And he said, Jesus wants you to know that he's not just breaking the chains, but he's taken the cuffs off so that the chains will never be reattached again. And I said, okay. And he said he wants you to reach up and touch his hand. And so I reached up as if Jesus was right there, and I held his hand. And he said he wants you to know that this is the day where everything changes and that you'll remember for the rest of your life. And I said, okay. I got up, I thanked him. I went back to my wife, who was just sitting in the chair, and I fell on my face before her, and I just repented to her, and I wept at her feet. And I repented and I apologized, and she sat there and, as she should have, didn't believe a word that was coming out of my mouth, because I had repented 1,000 times before this, but nothing ever changed. So went home, and that was April 25th of 2021. And I wrote on my mirror underneath, done with mediocre, I wrote freedom, and in parentheses I wrote cuffs off. And the church met in the evening. And so on the evening of the next night, on the 26th, I was in the bathroom. And what I know now is but I didn't know at the time, the Spirit of God fell on me. And I knew in an instant that I was completely free from alcohol. I just had the revelation, and I yelled to Leslie, my wife's name, Leslie. She comes running up the stairs. I said, I'm free. Alcohol, it's gone. It's gone. And she's like, right, good for you. I'm like, no, it is. It's gone. And I just knew it. And I felt like I'd understood a little bit about neurological pathways and what we create in our mind. And I'm like, I felt like he reached down into my head and completely took the neurological pathway that I had been constructing for like 28 years and removed it out of my head. So it didn't just break the addiction, but took away any memory of it and any desire and any consequence from it in my mind in that moment of time. And I've had complete freedom from that ever since. And it's been almost 4 years now. I haven't had the desire to touch a drink of alcohol. And so the next night, same time frame, 5 o'clock-ish, I'm in the bathroom, and the Spirit of God falls on me, and I have the exact same revelation for pornography, and I yell, Leslie, it's gone, Leslie, and she runs up the stairs. I mean, I'm yelling at the top of my lungs because I just knew it. It was so assured in my soul and in my spirit. And she comes up, I said, pornography, it's gone, it's gone. And she's like, right, good for you. And I'm like, no, it is. And I haven't had the desire for that in 4 years. Pornography completely broken off my life. Zero desire. Absolutely amazing. And so that became the start of my journey of an intimate relationship with Jesus, because I knew he was there and I knew what freedom was now. And so I started a life of worship, and I began to worship him at home. I began to worship him at church. And I would go up front and worship, and I would kneel, and I would feel the peace and the coolness of God fall on me when I would. And in that worship, it became my safe place. It became my refuge when the reality of my marriage still most likely being over, and me losing my wife who I loved, but I hadn't loved well, and losing my kids who I adored, my 3 kids. When that reality was put in my face, I would just fall on my knees and worship. I put in AirPods and I would worship, and my YouTube stream just came alive with like Holy Spirit anointed worship. And I would just go into my secret place with him right then and there. I remember specifically one time I was mowing the lawn and I had AirPods in and I was worshiping, and the Spirit of God fell on me, and I just let the lawnmower go and I'm on my knees and I'm just worshiping and I'm weeping and I'm outside, and it's just like I'm yelling at the top of my lungs. And it just became a lifestyle, and I started encountering God, and I didn't really understand what was going on, but he was saving me in the process. He was refining me. He was burning things off of me, and he was revealing who he was. He was revealing that he truly was my refuge. So when I had a storm in front of me, I could just go up underneath his wing. I could go into the strong tower and I could be safe. And everything that I had read in the Bible started becoming true. And he would start breathing revelation on new words that I hadn't even read in a long time, but they would come to my mind, and he would reveal that, hey, that's that thing you just went through, that was me. It wasn't just words in a book. And for instance, one example, I started just seeking out houses and places of worship. And there was this place called the Bethany House of Worship, and they met on Wednesday. And for 3 hours, we basically worshiped. And I was on the ground worshiping, and there was new people every time. Usually there's a few people that were the same, but different group of people. And I was worshiping, and the Lord was just encountering me, and I was making a puddle on their hardwood, and I was just broken before the Lord. And then I started seeing my heart, and I saw this black, bruised, battered, hard, broken heart, and it started slicing open. And it started at the top and it went all the way to the bottom. And then out of that, it started opening, and this birthing of this most vibrant, beautiful heart just started coming out of it. And I could feel pain, but I also felt joy and peace, and I could feel it in the moment. It was like the most terrible, but the most amazing thing happened at once. And I literally was leaving a puddle on the ground. And this guy that I'd never met before, never seen before, comes over and puts his hands on my shoulder. And he says, the Lord just wants you to know that he's filleting your heart right now. And I go, I know. And I just lose it. And sure enough, I mean, I don't know what's going on. Like this isn't church. This isn't something that I was taught. And a day or two later, I hear in my spirit, he'll take your heart of stone and he'll give you a heart of flesh. And I knew that is truth. That is what he was doing in that moment. My anger left. The anger that I had struggled with for however many years was completely gone. The vacillating of my needing my wife's love and affirmation, vacillating from that, being up and down, was completely gone, because I knew suddenly I was affirmed by him. I was loved by him. Just my life began to dramatically change, and I began to get true freedom from abandonment, which I didn't even understand. I was able to release my father from leaving me when I was 4 years old, and then my brother for really not hanging out with me like I wanted him to, and I was able to release them from that and get freedom from that, and the insecurity and the not enoughness that comes from that brokenness and that abandonment. And I got healing from that, and I just became completely a new creation. The old was gone and the new was coming. And through the process, my wife just had a hard time believing it. Other people could see it. People at church, friends, family could see the change, and they were blown away. And I was sharing my testimony, and it was amazing, but my wife wasn't believing it. Rightfully so. I had proven for 12 years who I was in her mind. It wasn't going to be unraveled and changed in a few months. And so there was, that became my new Goliath. That became my persecution. was what my wife still thought of me, even though I was different. And he taught me in that season to become love. He taught me that while I was still a sinner, he died for me. And now while she was still a sinner, it was my turn to die for her. And he taught me how to do that. He taught me how to be gentle. He taught me how to be patient. He taught me how to be kind. He taught me how to love. I saw her completely different. I didn't need her for her love anymore. I became a revelation of his love to her that didn't need anything back, that just wanted her to know that she was loved. So I would leave her notes everywhere. Every morning I would make her coffee and leave her a note that just prophesied who she was, and I would put it on her coffee and I'd set it by her bed so she could wake up to it. And in this process, I just became the love of Christ because I had the love of Christ. And he taught me how to be a servant. He taught me how to love her through doing the dishes, through helping out with the kids. And he spoke to me after that, when you love other people, you're loving me. And I knew that I could start loving him through loving my wife. So it became a joy to serve her because I knew I was serving him. And so I wasn't served to get things back. I wouldn't serve to be a good husband. I started serving to bless his heart. I started serving and loving to bless her so that she knew the same love that I knew, so that my life could be the manifest revelation of his love. And it began the process of saving our marriage. And it took 3 years. But after 3 years, she was having a hard time living in the same house because my life was now convicting her, and she wasn't sure if she could have the same heart for God that I did and if we would go down the same paths. And so I got an email, and it's almost to the day, 3 years later, she's looking for an Airbnb, and we're not even fighting anymore. And I mean, hardly at all. I can't say anymore, but what was happening twice a month or twice a week, now we're maybe having a disagreement once every 3 months, and it's short-lived. And I'm quick to repent of anything that I've done wrong. And I call her, I'm like, why did I get an email about an Airbnb? And she's like, well, why do you think? She said that because she moved out a couple times before and she stayed in an Airbnb. I'm like, you're not moving out. Like, why would you move out? And she's like, I don't know. I just need my time. I need my time. I'm like, you can't, like, it was mind-blowing to me, completely mind-blowing. I had no idea it was coming. I'm like, our marriage is amazing. She's just like, I don't know if I can live the same life as you, and I just need to, I've wanted an extended separation for a long time, and I've never got it. And I was struggling with that. And I said, please just hold off. And she was holding off for a couple days. And I was working out in the gym, worshiping the Lord, which is one of my favorite places to worship him. And the Spirit of God said, let her go and just bless her. Let her go and bless her. And so I went inside and I said, I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to love you. And if there's any guilt about separating the kids by reserving this Airbnb, I can take that away and I'll reserve it for you so that there's no guilt on your end. I'm gonna go to Costco and I'm gonna get you some stuff. And I went to Costco and I got her all the stuff that we never buy, but she always wants. And like expensive kombucha and all that stuff. And I just loaded it in her car. I helped her pack her car, and it started breaking her. And she had rented an Airbnb for 5 weeks, paid for it in full. And in 3 days, she came back home, my wife again. For the first time, she was fully in, fully committed, fully surrendered to the fact that I was who it seemed like I was, or who I said I was. And she was all in. And that was 1 year ago. And our marriage has been so beautiful since. We started online ministry, Lifestyle Christianity University, and I have seen my wife blossom in her own relationship with the Lord. Her intimacy, her desire for his word. She has just got on fire. She's just a light into this world. She's just grown in so many ways. And our kids now get to see just a beautiful home. Our marriage, our family is no longer on the verge of being separated or torn apart. It's just a beautiful, amazing environment where the Spirit of God dwells. And yeah, last night she just whispered across the room, across the table, "You're my best friend. I love you. I love you. I love you." And that is so amazing because it's all Jesus. And that's the biggest part of my testimony, is that he gave me the opportunity to try to fix everything on my own. And I couldn't touch it. In fact, I made everything worse. But then when I surrendered my life to him, he came in and he fixed me. He healed me. He saved me. And then he saved my marriage. And he saved my family. And he saved my legacy. In Jesus' name.